Hi team, and welcome back to our Anchor Facts series on the history of India. Today we're going to talk about how one Hindu culture became the unstable patchwork of Hindu and Muslim countries that it is today. The first reason is that Hindu culture was never a single country, no matter how many empires came and went. The closest it ever came to becoming a country was under the control of the British Raj, as we saw last time. But the British Raj only lasted from 1858 to 1947. This was enough time for the tutelary imperialism of Britain to provide technology, education, and democracy, but not enough time to put all the pieces that India had become together in a lasting way. The main reason was that the various waves of Muslim invasions had created a great conflict inside of India between Muslims and Hindus. The Hindus had withstood over 1,000 years of attacks by Muslims, and were still very much in the majority. So what would happen if a single new country would be created out of the British Raj? One single India, with Hindus and Muslims in it together. Everyone who knows history knows the answer. The Hindus would get their revenge. They would use their position of power to attack their fellow Indians and oppress the Muslims. There probably would be a civil war. This is why, long before India became independent, Indian Muslims, led by Muhammad Jinnah, proposed the partition of India to accompany independence. Partition means simply the breaking up into parts of something that is otherwise a single whole. Like Gandhi, Jinnah was educated as a lawyer in England and returned home to help the cause of independence. But his efforts were specifically designed to protect Indian Muslims. He founded the All India Muslim League. In a famous speech organizing the Pakistan movement, Jinnah explained, "Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religions, philosophies, social customs, and literature. It is quite clear that Hindus and Muslims derive their inspiration from different sources of history. They have different epics, different heroes, and different episodes. To yoke together two such nations under a single state, one as a numerical minority and the other as a majority, must lead to growing discontent and final destruction of any fabric that may be so built up for the government of such a state." The British rulers of India understood this point, and they knew of at least one other example of such a problem. They were also the rulers of the region they had named Palestine, in which Jewish people and Muslims both wanted to rule themselves and refused to cooperate with each other. In India, the problem was that Muslims were found in almost every area in quite large numbers. There was no way to carve up India to have areas with only Muslims or only Hindus. But a line had to be drawn somewhere, and the British did their best. When granting independence to India, they also created Pakistan as a two-part country, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Since tens of millions of Hindus were living in what would become Pakistan, and tens of millions of Muslims were living in what would become India, they had a difficult choice of what to do. Millions of them would become stuck on a side of the line where they would have no control of the government. Not surprisingly, therefore, they moved. Millions of them in both directions. In one area in particular, the problem was too difficult to solve by having the people move. The land of Jammu and Kashmir in the northwest had a largely Muslim population, but a Hindu ruler. The rulers wanted to stay independent, making a third country. But Pakistan believed they would join India, so they invaded. And the result was the First Indo-Pakistani War, starting in 1947. The issue has never been resolved. There was even a war this year, 2025, in the same area. Luckily, it was a small war because, as we will see in the last lesson, both India and Pakistan now have nuclear weapons. If they were to have a major war, one could imagine one side resorting to the use of nuclear weapons. And if one side does it, so will the other, which could be the biggest disaster in human history. But the fact that India is still unstable after all this time is part of the puzzle of post-colonial India. What makes it even more complicated is that there is even a third religion involved called Sikhism. There are perhaps 25 million Sikhs in northwestern India and Pakistan, and they do not want to be ruled by Muslims or Hindus. Is it really possible for India to manage all this and become a cardinal culture? We'll try to answer that question in the final lesson of the series. See you next time.